Right, James, let's go on to your next wine.
Cool. Well, I've got our 2021 Chardonnay here. So this, together, I guess, with the Pinot Noir, marks a real step change for the direction we were heading in with our wines, and I guess the ambition alongside that as well. I think, we talked about our belief really that the potential for English still wines was significantly more than what we had seen, and we really kind of wanted to demonstrate that by taking a completely unique approach for our still wines. And this culminated in the ambition to make some real high quality Chardonnays, but also Pinot Noir as a red as well in this country. Which brings us to the Crouch Valley. And I know you're familiar with a lot of the producers and growers in that region as well. I think you've had Graham Martin and Caroline on fairly recently as well.
Yeah.
And what we noticed over a few years of sourcing fruit, which is, I guess, the benefit of our supply model, is that on a very consistent basis, the ripeness of this fruit was several leagues above some of the other areas we're sourcing fruit from. And so, we had conversations in and around sort of 2017 time with a chap called Duncan McNeil from McNeil Vineyard Management, who manages a lot of these vineyards on behalf of the owners and the farmers who own the land. And it was really one of those conversations that went along the lines of, look, if we continue to put the standard clones of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in the land in this particular region in Crouch Valley, we will kick ourselves in 10 years' time, 25 years' time, because the potential here is uniquely more than other areas, certainly that we're familiar with. And there are other areas now becoming more noticeable in terms of their potential also. I think, Suffolk, for example, is going to be a really exciting region in the next 5 to 10 years. But in the River Crouch and the surrounding areas, specifically on the north side of the Crouch, there was this huge potential. So we started working with Duncan and the growers to discuss what kind of not only the vines, but the clones of those vines were going to go in the ground. And we were only looking at still wine clones. So this Chardonnay is a kind of representative, I guess, of that whole new approach that we've taken. So we do the vast majority of this is your typical kind of Dijon Burgundy Chardonnay clones. And then we've got a couple of aromatic Chardonnay clones chucked in as well, notably Freiburg 155 and INRA 258. And essentially what we're looking to do with the Chardonnay is all about complexity, mouthfeel, and body. And so we've got, by and large, we're focusing on two main blends, the Chardonnay blend and the Pinot Noir blend. And for this particular Chardonnay, we don't want to go over oak. So we've only got about 7 or 8% new oak in this. But the vast majority of this is still aged in older oak as well. The wine goes through malolactic fermentation. It undergoes a program of batonnage for the first 4 months in barrel, which is where you're stirring the lees in the barrel, the dead yeast, which releases all kinds of manoproteins and things like that into the wine, which give it that kind of mouthfeel, complexity in terms of flavor. And it's got some other benefits as well. It kind of helps you with natural tartrate stability as well. So we're looking for that complexity you get from oak aging, from malolactic fermentation, and obviously underpinning all of that is the ripeness of the fruit itself. So I think, yeah, we're super proud of this wine, and the 2021, which we're tasting now, is just starting to find its stride. It's I think it's starting to drink beautifully.
Do you age your still wines for a long time? Have you had any experiments with that to see what happens?
Yes, so we vary. So the Chardonnay typically will be in barrel for about 9 months, and then we will release it possibly about 3 months after we've taken it out of barrel. The Pinot Noir can vary. So the main blend Pinot Noir will typically spend about 12 months in barrel. But on top of the kind of main wines, if you like, we also do some single vineyard expressions. So we will take not, we're not going through and selecting what we think are the best barrels. We're going through and selecting the barrels which we think represent that vineyard best. So we know the fruit very well. We know what it's like when it comes in. And we're looking for those barrels that really give you a sense of somewhereness. And those typically will have a little bit more aging. And the proportion of new oak changes as well. But yes, we vary the aging depending on the wine.
Yeah, okay. So let's dive in. It's got very smooth aromas,
Mm.
really, really delicate.
Yeah, I think it was a wine actually that during its aging, it was never. Some wines are kind of just hit their stride so early, you're confident they're going to be magnificent right from the off. 2021 Chardonnay wasn't actually the case. We were actually nervous a little bit about it initially because after the 2020 harvest, which had been so abundantly ripe, the 2021 was a little bit more reserved. And all the way through its aging, we sensed that there was some nice power there, but it wasn't so open so early like the 2020 was. And actually, we're starting to, this wine is been in bottle now for getting on for 12 months, and I think it's actually, just as I said, just starting to hit its stride now. I think the balance of this is beautiful.
It's interesting because the aromas, they feel almost like they need a bit of time to release and to come out. And for what is a young wine, I'm surprised by that. The palate is the complete opposite. It was so fruit forward. It really hit my tongue well. It was a lovely texture, a beautiful mouthfeel again, but it was very full. It's a full-bodied white wine, which I'm surprised about again because it's so young, and it is harder for English wines to get so much body to them. But this has got it, and it's yeah, it's a really beautiful, smooth Chardonnay. It hasn't got any of the racing acidity or sort of from underripe fruit at all. It's very soft, very smooth, well balanced. But yeah, really, really, really nice texture on the tongue and very Moorish as well, which is great.
Yeah, well, I think that's what we're looking for. And you make a good point about the racy acidity. Again, depending on where you are in the country, you've got to remember that you've got those different clones of Chardonnay. And if you're trying to make a still Chardonnay out of a sparkling wine clone, you're always fighting that acidity from the off. You've got to take the approach that you've got to do it from the ground up if you're serious about a still wine Chardonnay. Um, and I think this is what this has. You've got to have that level of ripeness to start with, otherwise you're fighting it all the way through its aging and everything else. And I'm just super proud of it. I think it's all about complexity, mouthfeel, and you've got that lovely kind of there's lovely fruit characteristics coming through as well. You've got some lemon, you've got some apple, but you've also got some stone fruits coming through as well with it, and then you've got the lovely kind of subtle oak coming through with it as well. So I just, for me, this is just tasting so beautifully now.
It is, and one of my favorite characteristics of it is there's a lot of melon to it, which I'm really quite surprised about actually. But it's really nice, and that blends in wonderful with the rest of the wine. It's a really, again, just a very nice, pleasing, easy drinking white wine.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to have so many different fruits in there, from ranging right away from cool climate to hot climate. Because obviously, again, going back to melon, you'd expect that more from a hot climate region.
Mm.
But it's great that it's in there. It adds so much more to the wine.
I think that's what's so exciting about the great production in England. I think we're such a marginal climate. We're right in the extremes of viability, I guess, which is why it's so exciting when you find these pockets of land that do give you something unique. And we talked about the Crouch Valley. It's got so many things going for it. Typically annual rainfall is under 600 millimeters per year. Typically, due to the proximity to the River Crouch itself, the vineyards don't get affected by frosts. They may get a slight nibble, but not to the degree of some of the other main producing regions. And the killer factor really is the soil. So it's London clay in this area predominantly. And I'm sure you've talked about this and heard about it many times before, but the unique characteristic of London clay is that it doesn't yield its moisture very readily. And why that's important is that in this country, typically you get the autumn rains coinciding with harvest time. And historically, you see the rains coming in, everyone dives into the vineyard and picks their grapes. But and the reason you're doing that is, say, for example, on chalk soil, which is relatively free draining, if you've had a long, hot, dry summer, the vines are desperate for water, and therefore, as soon as the water seeps into that particular ground, into those soils, the root system sucks up that water at such a rate of knots that you get huge dilution of flavour and character in the berries, and in extreme cases, you get berry split. With clay soil, on the other hand, because it doesn't yield that water very readily, it holds on to the water throughout the year. And when you get a heavy rain event, as we have had actually in 2020 and 2021, and obviously 2023 was also a challenging year, you can, as long as the grapes are healthy on the vine, you can leave them hanging, which is significant for Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. You need that physiological ripeness alongside the sugar ripeness. So it's an absolute secret weapon in the Crouch Valley.
Yeah, and as you said, that does give it a lot more. Well, it's a very important part that the vines are and the grapes are allowed to mature for that little bit extra time, just to add to the fruit.
Yeah.
Okay, so your next wine, James?
So we've got. I thought this would be really cool to try with you today. So obviously we've been making a Pinot Noir Rosé since we launched our still wines, and the last couple of years we've just started to push the boundaries in this style now by making our Pinot Noir Rosé Reserve, and kind of mimicking really what you do in terms of the production process for Chardonnay. We thought, well, let's go down this route with Rosé and see how far we can push this. So this small batch, it's pressed straight to barrel, it's fermented in barrel, goes through partial malolactic fermentation, it has batonnage. So you're kind of mimicking the process of your Chardonnay production, but using Pinot Noir. And the 2022, which we're tasting here, was a fabulous year for Pinot, as it was for Chardonnay. And you've got this beautiful color from the 2022s. I think there's been a real trend towards a paler style of rosé. Well, actually, I think, if you've got ripe grapes, then show off those ripe grapes. So yeah, it's just Pinot Noir, but with added bells and whistles, if you like. This has seen oak aging, it's got malolactic, it's got batonnage, and it just adds some really lovely extra dimensions to what would otherwise be a fruit-driven rosé.
Just before we go on to the wine, something that just reminded reading the back of the label here, and I meant to ask you also, because you source your grapes from a number of different regions around the UK, and you mentioned this one too. How do you transport them to the winery? Is it direct by lorries? Just for those who don't know, explain the process of getting the grapes to you.
Yeah, so during harvest, we pick in the vineyards. They're loaded into typically 300 kilo bins. We don't go any more than that because we find that 300 kilos, especially when hand harvested, there is no detrimental effects to the quality of the grapes. They come straight to us at the winery. We operate 24 hours throughout harvest. So those grapes arrive and are processed. So really from picking, say, let's take Essex, for example, we're based in Devon, from picking to weighing and starting to process those grapes is no more than 6 to 7 hours. And, you know, unlike other regions like California or Australia, where it's really commonplace to transport grapes vast distances from vineyard to wineries, in the UK, you know, when you're picking in October time, it's really, really cool in the evening. So we see no detrimental effects to the grapes at all. So it works very well.
Well, this is a very lovely rosé. It's again, it's very fruit forward, like a lot of your wines, which is great. And I do think that's an important characteristic that English wines and the industry retains. But it's very smooth. It's quite subtle. Wonderful coating of the tongue. There's a really nice, pleasing finish, as I said, with all of your wines. But yeah, lots of fruit, and it does just, forgive the cliche, but burst being drunk outside in the afternoon in the sun. You know, it's just a nice wine to enjoy slowly.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it is interesting. You've got that spice element coming in from the oak. You mentioned the mouthfeel. Yeah, you know, we're adopting the lees stirring and the malolactic ferment, or partial malolactic fermentation in this case, that we'd adopt with a Chardonnay. So it's just all about mouthfeel and complexity, and highlighting the natural ripeness of the fruit as well. So it's a lovely experiment. We've done this now for a couple of years. We're still refining it. So we've got some really cool ideas for 2024 already, and how we can just continue to kind of develop this style over the next 5-10 years.
It's very it's very full for a rosé. Sometimes they can be quite thin and quite crisp and almost a bit too focused on the red berries. This is really nice and well balanced and defined. And I just love, as I said, how full the wine is. It doesn't feel like it's lacking. It's very pleasing to drink.
Well, you know, as it comes back to the conversation we've been having, you know, these are all still wine clones. I think we're not trying to force this. You know, you've got to do it from the ground up. You can't shortcut that process. But if you do it in the right place, you get all the elements right, then you know the fruit that comes in is naturally aligned with the style of wine you want to make, which in our case is fruit forward and and full,
Yeah,
which is what you're saying, which is great.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, James, your next wine.
Okay, so alongside the Chardonnay, the kind of the key challenge in the UK, the last kind of bastion of the last frontier was to see if the UK could make a consistently high quality red wine. And this is where, you know, all of the research and the kind of ground up work we've done with clone selection, area selection comes to the fore. So with Pinot Noir, again, you can't shortcut it. We work with a blend of Spätburgunder clones, which is German Pinot Noir clones, and some typically Burgundian clones, Dijon clones. And we feel that that mix actually, given the UK and our marginal climate, really is the perfect mix of clones to give us something quite consistent. But the key thing is they're all still wine clones. All of the fruit comes in 100% river crouch, just like the Chardonnay, just like the Rosé. We don't shortcut that. I could talk for hours about how we go about this, but 2020, we fermented every single clone from every single vineyard in 1-ton bins, because we're all about learning process as fast as we can as to what those vineyards are giving us and what the clones from each vineyard is giving us. The second year, 2021, we worked a lot more on field blends, and looking at whole bunch percentages and taking that approach instead. So, you know, we're on a real learning curve. 2021 was a fantastically challenging harvest, but we actually ended up with Pinot Noir fruit that was as right as 2020, which was a real triumph. But we harvested about 3 weeks later, just to put that into context.
Okay.
So everybody else has brought their fruit in, and we were out there. Our fruit was still on the vines, and it is so important. You need that sugar accumulation, of course, but without that hang time, you don't get the physiological ripeness which you just desperately need in a red wine. So you're looking for ripeness of the tannins, ripeness of the stems, how easily the berries are detaching from the bunch, and all those things you need to make consistent quality red. So this is what we have. Again, all open top fermentation, 1 ton fermentations. 2021 was all whole berry, with about 8% whole cluster in the fermentations. Manual pigeons, which is the punching down. We do that every 8 hours. We like to ferment our Pinots hot. And the reason for that is all to do with body and extraction. And then we're focusing very much on mouthfeel. So after fermentation's finished, the wine is given about 12 hours settling in a tank, and then it's transferred straight to oak barrels. And this wine is about 30% new oak, French oak predominantly, and full malolactic fermentation in oak. And then it has a further period of aging of about 10 to 11 months after that.
So it's interesting that you put it in new French oak, because a lot of the time it can be the barrels that have come over from France that are, second or third use, etc., because they can be impact, or rather impart too much of the oak flavoring on the wine and become too dominant. But you feel that this stands up to it, and then that's okay, even though it is only a small percentage. But that's a stylistic choice of yours, I presume.
Yeah, 100%. I think the temptation is to go too heavy with new oak, but you've got to balance it against the wine. And the other aspect, of course, is that a lot of these vines are relatively young. So, if you're serious about growing vines and making wine, you can't think in terms of years. You've got to start thinking in terms of generations. So, we can't push this too hard too early or rush it. 30% new oak is about the limit that I think we're stylistically looking for at this stage. We take a slightly different approach when we're looking at a single vineyard, small lots. That's slightly different, and the oak percentage can go up. But for this particular style, yeah, 30% we feel is about right.
It's got a lovely nose on it. I mean, you've got the red fruit, but more interesting, it's like plums, and
Yeah,
also the beetroot as well. Like there's the surprising earthiness on the nose, but it's really nice.
yeah. And again, 2021, just like the Chardonnay, it was such a challenging year, and to see this wine now, and again, just like the Chardonnay, it's just starting to find its feet now. It's such a triumph, because essentially, if you can make a red wine from the 2021 harvest to this standard, and this has won a decanter silver medal, which given the fact that the wine goes in even younger to that process, I think we were so unbelievably proud. And to follow on from the 2020, which won the IWSC trophy as well,
Mm.
which was the first red wine to ever do that from the UK. We feel like the approach is vindicated.
No, I remember that was a lovely wine, that one. But this is too, and again, it's really really nice how much ripe fruit you've got. So again, there's lots of beetroot, but also rhubarb. That was the first thing I got on the palate, which was lovely, because it's almost like the slight tartness is there,
Yeah,
but without the sharpness, which is sometimes what you can get. But you still got a lot of red fruit. We've got beetroot, plum. But yeah, lovely mouthfeel, nice coating of the tongue. It's a real reach for more, this wine. You just
yeah.
want to keep drinking it.
It's got some tannins, it's got some structure, but they're fairly silky. I think this wine will actually age very well. And yeah, I think it's just, for me, with the Chardonnay and the Pinot, a year in bottle it just elevates the wine. You know, it's just starting to find its feet again. And these wines, unlike your aromatic white wine styles, they need time in bottle. You know, we're not looking for these to kind of be drunk and gone within a year. These wines we want to last 5 to 10 years. And yeah, so I think, yeah, I just super proud of it.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's a very, very nice English red wine, this. And again, it's interesting how like the depth that you've been able to achieve. So there's also a lot of black fruit. You know, we've touched on the red fruit, but black currants are coming through, and this is where it's multi-dimensional. It's not just a fruit forward wine, which is
Yeah.
really good. It's really, I mean, as I say, it's a very popular one, and it's not surprising.
Well, I think, you know, that's where the benefit of the different clones and the different vineyards come into play. You know, all of those things build layers in the wine, and then you add to the oak regime that we carry out on top of that, and you know, I think we create something that we're quite proud of.
Yeah, well, as he should be. Well, James, thank you very much. Six great wines. It's been an absolute pleasure. What's coming next for yourself and Lyme Bay? What does the future hold?
Oh, I think watch this space. We've got the 2022 wines. They're going to be being released later this year. I think, you know, they're just amazing. I'm so the 2022 harvest again was slightly challenging for all kind of different kinds of reasons. But the intensity and the complexity, especially in the Chardonnay and the Pinots, are something else. So really, really excited about those. And you know, we're just in the kind of blending discussions now. So all those decisions are taking place over the next few weeks. And then we're going to be releasing some single vineyard wines as well. So we did some small volume single vineyard releases from 2020. Um, you know, just labors of love, really. We're not looking to sell masses of those, and never will be. But what's particularly poignant, I suppose, is that 2022, and I haven't watched Graham's video, but I rather suspect he said it. We're going to be doing a small little tribute to Roy Martin. So a very, very limited release of Pinot Noir from Martin's Lane. We've worked with Roy for many years. Frankly, I was devastated when he passed away so suddenly last year, as were many people. He goes really under the radar in terms of his influence and importance in the industry. But I personally owe an awful lot to Roy, as does the industry. The Crouch Valley would not be what it is without Roy Martin, and that is not overstating it. His vision, his passion, his drive, you know, is created the Crouch Valley as to what it is today. And so, yeah, in our small way, we'll be releasing a little tribute and a bit of a doff of the cap to Roy. So, yeah, really excited about that as well.
And so when did you say you think that will be available?
That'll be available later in the year, so probably late summer. I think we'll release that.
Okay, good. So lots more wines to come. Well,
Yeah,
James, thanks again. Yeah, absolute pleasure. Thank you.
no, my pleasure. Really, really enjoyed it. Thanks, Guy.